think it's time that we have a conversation about useful idiots. Guys, we are here to talk about the guy that we've made probably the most amount of videos on in this platform, but of course we've not talked about him recently, and that right there would be Bill Maher. So Bill Maher, as most of you guys know, has kind of taken a bit of a turn away from the, let's just say, the extreme elements of the left, but I have to always remind people every time I do a video where Bill Maher is involved that he's not going to the right. He's not changed at all. As a matter of fact, he probably will still vote Democrat in the next presidential election. Also, something else too, when people say, you know, Bill Maher might be able to get behind this person here on the conservative side or on the Republican side of the Republican ticket, I have to remind them it's never a good idea to let liberals pick your candidate going forward. But still, here we are having this conversation about what's going on in colleges. Don't worry, that video will be out to go along with this one here tomorrow, as well as an update on the migrant situation in Chicago. So make sure you guys stick around for all three. But the question that we are asking is, what is a useful idiot? And we need to discuss exactly what a useful idiot is. Now, before we go any further, I want to play the full minute-long segment. Of course, there's going to be a header over it, of course, like always, because of HBO, their copyright. And, of course, we're going to play that. We're going to talk a little bit more about this because apparently SNL, they are now under fire. That's right. Saturday Night Live is under fire for, let's just say, a certain segment that they did that did not exactly go over very, very well with the ADL, which, of course, the ADL is not your friend either, but still, I want to go ahead and get that out there. Let's go ahead and roll this and have the conversation on the other side.
Any other group that you could say, fuck the blank, and have it be acceptable?
The double standards on campus, we talk about this in canceling, we talk about this at FIRE all the time. The double standards are astounding, but you have to have them when you have policies like this, because if they actually enforce them against everybody, they wouldn't last a second.
Yeah, I honestly think the kids, I think they're, you know that phrase, useful idiots?
Yeah.
The bigger scandal here is that these are the biggest, most esteemed colleges in the country, and they've raised a bunch of fucking idiots.
You guys obviously heard that. So what is a useful idiot? A useful idiot is somebody who is typically not informed on a certain issue. For example, and we're going to be talking about this a little bit more in video number 2, which I'm going to make tomorrow. The thing about useful idiots is that they are what I just said they are. They're people who don't really have any common sense, people who don't really have any brains. It's also the exact same as the phrase NPC, non-player character. Think about it this way here. A non-player character is obviously a figure in a video game. Say like you have like a shooter, a first-person shooter, let's say Call of Duty or whatnot. The people that you're obviously shooting, the enemies in front of you, they're obviously going to be non-player characters. You obviously ain't playing as them. They're just there for you to shoot at. It also goes to role-playing games. See, I probably should have used role-playing games like Final Fantasy, or I probably should have used that example first before mentioning first-person shooter, because I know somebody's probably going to get upset, or somebody's probably going to check me in the comment section, but that's okay. You guys can put whatever in there. It's fine with me. I'm always willing to have a conversation with anybody, even if they disagree with me. But still, at the same time, though, what is a useful idiot? Well, a useful idiot is somebody who doesn't really know anything. They get stirred up very fast. They get worked up by the media. They just believe whatever the hell comes out of the media's mouth. They don't do any fact checking or any research, and they just simply go along with the crowd. Next thing you know, after a while, you have a bunch of NPCs or useful idiots all working together, kind of like what you've been seeing with these protests in New York and Chicago after the Israeli-Gaza war started. These are people that we would call good old-fashioned useful idiots. Now, there are some people in there who have some sort of ties to these protests, ties to what's going on, but those who typically tend to get kind of wrapped up in the emotions of it, they're the useful idiots of the crowd. And oftentimes the state or the federal government or whoever the hell the news media wants to, whatever narrative they might want to throw out there, the useful idiot is obviously a cog in getting the narrative or getting what is meant to be said out in the open. Think about it like they're used for propaganda and propaganda purposes. Bezmonov did several videos on this, several lectures. I'll be linking a couple in the description box for you guys. I advise you guys listen to his lectures because everything that this man talked about is coming true today here in the United States. But then you get the case of SNL. Now, guys, I want to say this right now. Saturday Night Live. And I can already hear somebody saying in the comment section, you just don't like liberal comedy. First of all, the vast majority of comics that I grew up with from, I would say, the late 80s, the 90s, and early 2000s, for the most part, were classical liberals. Eddie Murphy's always been a classical liberal. Kevin Hart's always been a classical liberal. Even some of the guys in the Blue Collar Comedy Tour weren't exactly fully conservative. Then again, I think most of them were, but there were obviously a few of them out there that were not. I'm just saying there were a few, if you actually look into it, that were not exactly what we call the most conservative of people. But still, at the same time, though, basically what I'm trying to say is that comedy, of course, is subjective. If it comes from the left, if it comes from the right, it's whatever the hell makes you funny is obviously what comedy is. Bill Burr is definitely not a conservative. And, of course, I had to point out to everybody who watched the last video I did on that topic of him coming out telling liberals that they're stupid, that 6 minutes into the video I explained that Bill Burr was not a conservative, and of course his wife gave Trump the middle finger at the UFC event. So I just figured I'd go ahead and throw that out there. Even in that case there, anybody can be funny. The fact of the matter is that the ultra-woke left, however, doesn't really have much of a sense of humor, and what they think is funny is either A, not funny at all, very bland, or so offensive and out of touch that it just does not land, like what you're about to see here.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Now, I'm going to start screaming questions at these women like I'm Billy Eichner. Anti-Semitism, yay or nay?
I'm sorry, what?
Yes or no is calling for the genocide of Jews against the Code of Conduct for Harvard.
Well, it depends on the context.
Guys, what is SNL's demographic nowadays? Mostly people under the age of 30. Fact of the matter is that we've kind of dumbed down our society a little bit too much. Now, I'm going to talk more about that in video number 2, and I'm probably going to keep the SNL clip for that very reason, to kind of give you guys an example. But here's the thing. SNL's audience now is primarily young people, or they are the extremely old nostalgia crowd who still yearns for the days of the 70s and 80s and 90s, and of course they remain loyal to them. Mostly people in the cities, mostly also liberals too. So maybe that right there is helping out a little bit with the notion that we have a lot of useful idiots out there. Why so many of them are being created. Otherwise, I blame all of this right here on the school system not being, thorough when it comes to the topic of history, but don't worry, we'll talk more about that at the very, very end of the video. The Daily Mail took out an op-ed on this, and of course the writers at Saturday Night Live are facing a lot of scrutiny over this. Now, I've been told on several occasions, everybody keeps on saying this, that Saturday Night Live has got the greatest comedic writers ever. Saturday Night Live has not been funny since the early 2000s, okay? I would say that when it came out in the 1970s, you guys can go look at the old clips, the old videos where you had Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, Jane Curtin. The old school Saturday Night Live was good. Of course, the early 80s with Eddie Murphy. And of course, when Phil Hartman was on the show, it was pretty good. And then it had a bit of a down period in the mid 80s, and it picked back up towards the end of the 80s with Dana Carvey, and then eventually in the 90s, it was really funny when you had like Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, and of course the great Norm Macdonald. It began to lose its luster shortly after Will Ferrell stopped doing George W. Bush skits. It hasn't really been funny since, so it's not some recent phenomenon. This right here is just the way Saturday Night Live has been really for about the past 10 or 15 years. It's like late night TV. Ever since Jay Leno left, it just hasn't been good. Jimmy Fallon is okay, and Conan O'Brien is okay, but Craig Ferguson, I think, was like, for a little while there, was like the last guy that was actually good. Everything else nowadays is just Orange Man bad, and quite frankly, it's just not funny anymore. Now, this case right here seemed like it was a little bit out of touch because they decided to focus on the anti-Semitism hearings that are going on right now on Capitol Hill. Don't worry, that right there will be the primary subject for video number 2, especially what's going on at college campuses. And of course, Fareed Zakaria, I can't pronounce the guy's last name, from CNN actually checked the left on this. You know, it's pretty bad when CNN is checking their own when it comes to topics of this nature. But still, though, as I may have mentioned before, the ADL is kind of up everybody's rear right now. And trust me, the ADL is also not your friend as well. So don't go around thinking that they are, because the ADL in a lot of ways is responsible for a lot of what's actually going on. I've talked about this before, especially with the pro-Palestine or the pro-Free Palestine or the pro-Hamas crowd, which is what I would oftentimes like to call them, because whether they know it or not, they're actually simping for this. Now, guys, I'm going to play this for you. Make sure you guys watch it all the way through. Actually watch it, read the subtitles. I'll sum up what he said if you can't watch it, but still, make sure you guys listen to it all the way through, because this right here is the overall end game.
في كل مكان يجب أن نهجم على كل يهودي متواجد في الكرة الأرضية ذبحا وقتلا بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى. بكفي تسخين خلاص. اسخننا على الاخر، احنا اتفجرنا. وانت اهل الضفه الغربيه الى متى تسكتون؟ بدنا السكاكين تطلع 5 شيكل. رقبه اليهودي حقها قديش عندنا؟ 5 شيكل او اقل ان شاء الله تعالى. كل ابناء شعبنا جاهزين للتفجير. عملنا مصنع جديد ان شاء الله تعالى للاحزمه. مجهزين ان شاء الله تعالى في حاله دخولنا للسجن للسلك. جاهزين اخواتنا، كله جاهزات كلهن. يحملنا احزمه متفجره في سبيل الله. بنفتح ثغره ثغرتين في كل مخيم، 5 ثغرات، وبنضلنا واصلين نطربق لما نصلكوا. عشان هيك فكوا الحصار احسنكم. ستقتلون، والله ستقتلون باحزمتنا باذن الله سبحانه. شغلنا مصانع جديده للاحزمه شغاله. كل واحد مين بده حنصف على الدور، حزام حزام حزام، يلا. لا مفاوضات، لا اعتراف باسرائيل، لن نعترف باسرائيل.
Are you sure that you want to simp for this crowd? Basically, what he just said there is that they do not recognize Israel, and of course, to go on top of this, they, for the most part, just want to kill everybody who is Jewish. Yeah, not exactly a crowd that you want to side with. Now, I can already hear a lot of people saying that it's an open-air prison, but of course, I kind of exposed that a long time ago with one of Stu Peters' video because he shared it, that this right here is what Gaza once was. It looked really, really pretty or whatnot, and I was like, okay, you guys have been saying it's an open-air prison, but obviously it's not an open-air prison based upon the video you just showed us. And of course, Israel has turned that nation to rubble, or at least that little small strip to absolute rubble. Fact of the matter is this right here. Israel sustained possibly, I would say probably the worst attack they've had on them since the Holocaust, which by the way, will come up here in a second because obviously people need to learn some things and people obviously don't want to learn. So like I said before, this video is about useful idiots asking who they are. Oftentimes, useful idiots don't do any research at all and they just simply react. Think about it this way here. These are people who see an article, they see the headline, they don't really click on it or anything. They just automatically assume that the headline is automatically true without actually reading into it. I know this because I got caught doing this for a while too. I kind of reacted and after a while, I began to start actually reading into things. Roughly right around 2016, 17, right before I went to college for the second time, which is funny too because I got through college the first time actually reading the articles, but I went through a reactionary period for a while. But still, at the same time, that's basically what NPCs are. That's basically what these useful idiots really and truly are. They just simply react to whatever the news media tells them. And MSNBC was actually very, very much pro-Palestine in the early days of the offensive, and a lot of these people got radicalized, and now they're pissed off that the media has suddenly changed their tune. Of course, woke institutions like woke universities and colleges like Harvard, MIT, and UPenn, which we'll talk more tomorrow, we'll talk more about in video number 2 of the day. Obviously, these students have become more and more radicalized, and a lot of other students who would have been on their side from the very start are starting to see that the wokes don't really care about them or care about what it is that these people want. The wokes are very much a self-defeating people. They also, at the same time, are also, I know I'm saying also a lot, but in a lot of ways, they're self-defeating. Wokeness itself is completely and totally futile, but we'll discuss that more in later videos. The fact of the matter is this right here. The mainstream media, the institutions have gotten a hold of people who just simply react to things, and they've automatically chosen the tribe to be a part of, which, of course, is the Free Palestine tribe. And, of course, you're seeing it going on at the universities, and, of course, they're out there attacking any student that sides with Israel, anybody who actually disagrees with them, because that is what the media has programmed them to do. Of course, there's also another explanation that, quite frankly, could fix this entire thing. And when you see this clip here, you will automatically see where I'm going at with it.
So Michael Bashloss, he's a historian for MSNBC. He tweeted this out. 1 in 5 young Americans think the Holocaust is a myth.
Oh, I saw that. I saw that. See, this is, well, first of all, this also goes to why probably in school we shouldn't squish everything post World War II and right after
Black history
in Black history in one little week and just but spend all these weeks on the war 1812. But that's another story.
Relatively sizable lady there. That is Simone Sanders. That is Bernie Sanders' former campaign manager. The socialist, the commie, the freeloader. Bernie Sanders' former campaign manager. Now, guys, let me ask you a question. Why in the world do you think it's possible that only 1 out of every 5 students nowadays, 1 out of every 5 young people believe that the Holocaust happened? Now, me personally, I'm a Holocaust believer. Now, granted, YouTube will strike somebody for saying the contrary, but still at the same time, though, I've always believed that the Holocaust did, in fact, occur. Okay, it's in the history books. You read about it. World War II vets have talked about it, especially if you had World War II vets in your family. Some of these guys, of course, liberated some of these camps. Of course, there were some on the Russian side who also did as well. Liberated Eastern Europe, Americans, British, liberated the Western Front. Okay, what I'm trying to say to you is this actual documented history. 6 million Jews, and also to go on top of that, there were an additional 3 to 4 million people that were killed that were also considered to be undesirables. This also included some people who nowadays would be called LGBTQ or LGB, because trans I don't think was a thing back then. But of course, I'm pretty sure you guys know where I'm going at. Hitler killed gays and political prisoners and what he deemed to be undesirables also. You also had the Armenian genocide, that is actual documented proof. You also had all the deaths from Stalin's purges and the famine, that's all documented proof. You're denying literal history, and of course, to go on top of this, you've also got people radicalizing the hell out of these college students, mostly left-wingers who are actually doing this on the platform. There are a few on the other, but we're not going to get too much into that. But still, at the same time, I'm pretty sure you guys know where I'm going at with this. The fact of the matter is that the leftist YouTube and college institution are creating useful idiots. They're creating good old-fashioned non-player characters. However, here's the thing, though. What happens when these people get too emotional? What happens when everything is bottled up inside and these people eventually blow up? Or what happens when these people finally figure out that the crap that they've been fed for such a long time ends up being completely untrue? Blow up, they have a mind melt, they have a soul lost moment. That's what these people really and truly are. You've kind of conditioned these people to be so radicalized that at some point in time, they're going to do extremely stupid and very, very costly stuff in the name of their ideology. That's the problem with creating these useful idiots and these friggin' woke NPCs. These people have no brains, and honestly, to tell you the truth, at this moment in time, we're almost wondering if these people can even be saved. I'm pretty sure some of them can be, but for the most part, these people are already gone. It's our job here on the internet just to simply expose these people and expose what it is that's being taught to your children, so that way you can know how to course correct. Remember what I've always said. And of course, studies back this up, the one from fatherly.com. Conservatives typically tend to have 2 children per one household, that right there being 1 liberal per household. There's a reason why it is that they're going after these children and trying to radicalize these college students, because they know that their birth rate is on decline. That right there being the side that would side with the left. Think about this really quick. And I have to say this very, very delicately because of YouTube. Leftists, they tend to abort their children, mostly due to the fact that they want freedom from responsibility, but they typically tend to abort their children. Liberals as a whole don't want kids, and of course, if they have one beyond that there, that's kind of what they want, which is also creating another problem too, which I'll discuss in the later video. You've also got the T thing, which is automatically going to ensure that that person cannot have kids either. And of course, if you look at the minority groups, especially those who, especially black people who've got this extreme, and this is not all black people, just the ones who are getting abortions, it's an extremely high abortion rate. The fact of the matter is that the left is looking at a deficit of people and voters in the future. Now, we already know about the migrant crisis. We've already talked about this on several occasions, and I'll continue to talk about that, and I have a video on that tomorrow. But the thing is this right here. Their ideology, everything that they're doing is completely, totally self-defeating. And as a result of this, more and more useful idiots have been created. And then to go on top of this, they're not going to be able to reproduce beyond a certain part. So this is one of the reasons why it is that I don't want to black pill people at all. If anything, I'm trying to give you guys a bit of a red pill and a white pill, so that way you guys can know that at the end of the day, we will eventually win, and we will eventually win out. Which brings me to my last point. You guys obviously heard that about the Holocaust, where she said only 1 in 5 actually believe the Holocaust occurred. A lot of this is because we're not actually teaching history in schools. Now, I know some people who did get taught history, and in an actual history class when they got the high school. We're not teaching thorough enough. We need to be going through everything. World War I, World War II, the Civil War. We need to actually get an accurate version of history taught. And also something else too, civics definitely needs to be taught. If you taught civics and history in actual classrooms, even at a young age, I can promise you right now that 99.9% of the problems that we're experiencing right now would in fact not occur, because kids would have already known the actual truth, or they would have had at least a good enough primer to get them looking in. And also something else too, if parents know history too, it might be a good idea that you might tell those children, or at least explain to them exactly what happened at this event and why it is this way is the way it is. If the child learns it much, much earlier, they may go through a period where it kind of leaves them for a little bit, but it will come back to them at a much, much earlier age, and therefore they will not be as radicalized. With that right there being said, guys, make sure you guys hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, sign off in the comment section. I would love to hear what you guys have got to say, and I'll see you guys later.